Good morning again. We will deal in this in the session number 4 related to the course of English language uh, of the second level of psychology in psychology department of University of Clemson in Nigeria. We will deal in this course number 4 with behaviorism, because we were dealing in the previous courses with the academic curriculum, then with the bibliography, then we dealt with the text number 0, which is about the definition of psychology, and now we are dealing with the first approach of the first psychological approach, referring here to behaviorism, and we'll give an overview about this theory or approach. Of course, now we are referring, namely speaking, to approach rather than to refer to theory, because when we refer to theory, it means we are referring to sharp ideas and sharp interpretation, and also we are experiencing a clear and a definite, clear and at some point a final or in question answers. But when we refer to approach, that is to say, we are approaching the truth. We are not coinciding with the truth, and which means we are trying to think and trying to we are just interpreting, and we are just constructing ideas, and we are firmly believing that the idea that we reached are not sharp conclusions about this or that when we are studying this or that psychological phenomenon. This is the main difference between referring to theory and referring to approach. The reason I am using approach rather than to use theory, and that's what we can apply to behaviorism as an approach. Even that's when we refer to ism, because here we have behavior, and we have behavior, and we have behavior. This is a composed word or concept. We have behavior, which refers to conduct, mainly external conduct, and ism, which means to believe, which means to firmly believe on the main feature by which we can understand or explain psychological the psyche of a human being. And from the behavioristic outlook, the behavior is the model of explaining the psyche. In other words, for the behaviorist, the psyche is the behavior, and the behavior is the psyche, and there is a kind of similarity between saying that the psyche is his behavior or her behavior, and saying that the behavior of this one is his or her psyche. There is quite a synonymy between behavior and the psyche, and the reason why we refer to behaviorism, which means to believe on the supremacy of the behavior compared to other psychological components which are understood and explained based on the behavior. Having said this, for behaviorists, we cannot say that there is the psyche which is appearing outside what is characterizing the psyche, referring to pointing out the behavior. The reason why this approach is named behaviorism. And here we try to take our text, which is referring to behaviorism, from the Encyclopedia of Critical Psychology. The part of the text have been wrote by Smith, and it have been extracted from the Encyclopedia of Critical Psychology, which was edited by Thomas Theo in 2014. And here we'll refer to the text, which is defining and clarifying what does mean behaviorism. Behaviorism shares with psychoanalysis the rare status of being a major tradition of psychological thought with a long history of critical exposure, fluctuating fortunes, and unprecedented diffusion into the larger culture. This part of the text refers to the importance of behaviorism, like psychoanalysis. Both of them, they were very well known during the long history of psychological thought, and they were both approaches. They were idealized and at the same time criticized. And they were diffused into a larger culture, and various people from various social classes know what does mean behaviorism and what does mean psychoanalysis. And like psychoanalysis, I mean referring to behaviorism, it emerged from a conducive backdrop of social and intellectual trends to pose challenges to orthodox cultural beliefs. In other words, both behaviorism and psychoanalysis try to question the cultural beliefs which are shared and spread out in various societies. And why? Because behaviorism questioned orthodox cultural beliefs, because before the apparition of and the emergence of behaviorism, people were thinking on the psyche from by judging people. This person is because he or she is characterized by this or that psychological feature. He or she is good, or he or she is bad. But when behaviorism emerged, this this approach was focusing on studying the psyche from the objective perspective. In other words, to refer to the objective perspective means just to describe psychological features and not to judge this or that person based on this or that psychological features. Also, the terminology changed because before the emergence of behaviorism, people were referring to moral attitude, like this person is lying, this person is saying the truth, this person is good, this person is bad, taking into account the various psychological features. But when behaviorism came, it was just describing what this or that person is doing or expressing as a conduct, and not to judge him or her. And also the terminology changed because before they were they were using the following words: he or she lies, he or she's he or she is a criminal, and he or she is a hypocrite. But when behaviorism emerged, behaviorism was just describing what this or that person is saying or is doing, or he or she is behaving in this or that way, but without judging him or her. And this is the main turning point that when we compare between behaviorism and theological judgments, which were before the emergence of behaviors. And also, the main interest of behavior is to focus on external manifestations rather than inner depth, and it represents the particularity of American expression of the psychological enterprise. This is the main particularity of American psychological psychological American concerns from the academic outlook, because before the apparition or the emergence of behaviorism, people they were focusing on in-depth rather than external features, and behaviorism inverse this characteristic of or this view to think about psychological features, and it was I mean, in other words, behaviorist was focusing essentially on external manifestation rather than to think on what is not visible, what can be not seen. And from this perspective, behavior is dismissed. All what is no visible, and it just focuses on what we can see, what we can receive from our five senses, and this coincide with the scientific concerns in exact sciences and biological sciences, and from this horizon we can understand that behaviorism was sharply influenced, mainly influenced by the methodology of exact sciences and biological sciences. And from the perspective mentioned, behaviorism was influenced by the comparison between human behavior and no human behavior, like the comparison between human being and animals, mainly in a narrow experimental settings, and not in a natural situation or context. And based on narrow experimental settings, behaviorists try to suggest solutions to human difficulties in the wider world, or in other words, to resolve human problems not in his natural world. And this was mainly these solutions were mainly applied to problems of social control and self-management, which means that behaviorism was mainly used to control the behavior of and the personality of the subject, and to the reason why it was mainly applied in situations of learning, and it was a successful goal to that behaviorism reached, because it was the context in which teachers were able to control the psychological behavior of the learners, and also behaviorism were applied broadly to reach social control, because from the political perspective, politicians were concerned by how to control citizens, and behaviorism offered this kind of solutions for politicians. And from this perspective, behaviorism was an important approach to reach social control in general. And also behaviorism was applied in self-management, because it allows human being to reach a self-control, and also to know how to deal with various complicated situations in everyday life interactions. And behaviorism was applied to reach this kind of self-control and self-management, and it was a successful approach that was applied to reach this the goal mentioned. And at the end, we can say that behaviorism is a theoretical approach that is dealing with the observable physical activity, as we mentioned that earlier, and it is also focusing on the environmental determination and the malleability of behavior, and which means that the external context in which human being is living, if we control the variables that are characterizing the external environment of in which the human being is living, we can control a human being itself, and we can guide him or her into this or that goal, and this is based on the malleability of the behavior, and that's what characterizes a human being, a psychological psychological life of human being, which are from the behavioristic outlook, a set of various behaviors that could be determined and controlled by the environmental external environment. And from this perspective, we can say that the external when we control the external environment, we can control the behavior, because this one is malleable and not fixed. And thank you.